Hello and welcome back to the channel. I am Josh and we are going over the history of South Africa. One of the most notable features in the history of South Africa is Paul Kruger, or Kruger as it's said in Afrikaans. So let's jump into it. Stephanus Johannes Paulus Kruger, who was born on the 10th of October 1825 and passed away on the 14th of July 1904, and he was a South African politician. He was one of the dominant political and military figures in the 19th century in South Africa and state president of the South African Republic, or Transvaal, from 1883 to 1900, nicknamed Oom Paul or Uncle Paul in English. He came to international prominence as the face of the Boer cause of the Transvaal and its neighbour, the Orange Free State, against Britain during the Second Boer War of 1899 to 1902. He has been called a personification of Afrikanerdom and remains a controversial figure. Admirers venerate him as a tragic folk hero. Born near the eastern edge of the Cape Colony, Kruger took part in the Great Trek as a child during the late 1830s. He had almost no education apart from the Bible. A protege of the Voortrekker leaders Andries Pretorius, he witnessed the signing of the Sand River Convention with Britain in 1852, and over the next decade played a prominent role in the forging of the South African Republic, leading to its commandos and resolving disputes between the rival Boer leaders and the factions. In 1863, he was elected Commandant General, a post he held for a decade before he resigned soon after the election of President Thomas Francois Burgher. Kruger was appointed Vice President in March 1877, shortly before the South African Republic was annexed by Britain as the Transvaal. Over the next 3 years, he headed 2 deputations to London to try to have this overturned. He became the leading figure in the movement to restore the South African Republic's independence, culminating in the Boers' victory at the First Boer War of 1880. Kruger served until 1883 as a member of the Executive Triumvirate, where he was then elected a president. In 1884, he headed a 3rd deputation that brokered the London Convention, under which Britain recognized the South African Republic as a completely independent state. Following the influx of thousands of predominantly British settlers with the Witwatersrand gold rush of 1886, Uitlanders, or foreigners, provided almost all of the South African Republic's tax revenues but lacked civic representation. Boer burgers retained control of the government, the Uitlander program, and the associated tensions with Britain dominated Kruger's attention for the rest of his presidency, to which he was re-elected in 1888, 1893 and 1898, and led to the Jameson Raid of 1895-1896, and ultimately the Second Boer War. Kruger left Europe as the war turned against the Boers in 1900, and spent the rest of his life in exile, refusing to return home following the British victory. After he died in Switzerland at the age of 78 in 1904, his body was returned to South Africa for a state funeral and buried in the Heroes' Acre in Pretoria. His early life. Family and childhood. Stephanus Johannes Paulus Kruger was born on the 10th of October 1825 at Bulhoek, a farm in the Steynsburg area of the Cape Colony. The 3rd child and 2nd son of Caspar Jan Hendrik Kruger, who lived from 1801 to 1852, a farmer, and his wife Elisa née Steyn, who lived from 1806 and to 1834. The family of the Dutch-speaking Afrikaner background of German, French Huguenot and Dutch stock. Also counted amongst its ancestry was some Khoi blood, which came down to it from his ancestress Akrotua. The Kruger paternal ancestors had been in South Africa since 1713, when Jacob Kruger from Berlin arrived in Cape Town as a 17-year-old soldier in the Dutch East India Company's service. Jacob's children dropped the umlaut from the family's name, a common practice among South Africans of German origin. Over the following generations, Kruger's paternal forebears moved into the interior. His mother's family, the Steins, had lived in South Africa since 1668 and were relatively affluent and cultured by Cape standards. Kruger's great-grand-uncle Hermanus Steyn had been president of the self-declared Republic of Swellendam that revolted against company rule in 1795. Bulhoek, Kruger's birthplace, was the Steyn family farm and had been Elsie's home since early childhood. Her father, Dougebrand Steyn, had settled there in 1809. The Kruger and Steyn families were acquainted, and Casper occasionally visited Bulhoek as a young man. He and Elsie married in Cradock in 1820, when he was 19 and she was 14. A girl, Sophia, and a boy, Dougebrand, were born before Paul was born in 1825. His first two names, Stephanus Johannes, were chosen after his paternal grandfather, but rarely used. The provenance of the third given name, Paulus, was to remain a mystery. Johannes Meintjes wrote in his 1974 biography of Kruger, and yet the boy was always called Paul. Paul Kruger was baptized at Cradock on the 19th of March 1826. Soon thereafter, his parents acquired a farm of their own in the northwest at Vaalbank, near Colesberg, at the remote northeast of the Cape Colony. His mother died when he was 8. His father, Casper, soon remarried and had more children with his second wife, Heilige, née Duplessis. Beyond reading and writing, which he learned from relatives, the only education Paul Kruger received was 3 months of study under a traveling tutor, Tielman Roos, and Calvinist religious instruction from his father. In adulthood, Kruger would claim to never read any book apart from the Bible. The Great Trek. In 1835, Casper Kruger, his father, and his brothers Gert and Teens moved their families east and set up farms near the Caledon River, on the Cape Colony's far northeastern frontier. The Cape had been under British sovereignty since 1814, when the Netherlands ceded it to Britain with the Convention of London. Boer discontentment with aspects of British rule, such as the institution of English as the sole official language and the abolition of slavery in 1834, led to the Great Trek, a mass migration of Dutch-speaking Voortrekkers northeast from the Cape into the land on the far side of the Orange and Vaal rivers. Many Boers had been expressing displeasure at the British Cape administration for some time, but the Krugers were comparatively content. They had always cooperated with the British, but had not owned slaves. They had been given little thought to the idea of leaving the Cape. A group of immigrants under Hendrik Potgieter passed through Kruger's Caledon encampments in early 1836. Potgieter envisioned a Boer republic with himself in a prominent role. He sufficiently impressed the Krugers that they joined his party of Voortrekkers. Kruger's father continued to give the children religious education in the Boer fashion during the trek, having them recite and write down biblical passages from memory each day after lunch and dinner. At stops along the journey, The trackers made improvised classrooms, marking them with reeds and grass. The more educated immigrants took turns in teaching. The voortrekkers faced indigenous competition for the area they were entering from Mzilikazi and his Ndebele or Matabele people, a branch of the Zulu kingdom to the southeast. On the 16th of October 1836, the 11-year-old Kruger took part of the Battle of Vegkop, where Potgieter's Lager, a circle of wagons chained together, was unsuccessfully attacked by Mzilikazi and around 4,000 to 6,000 Matabele warriors. Kruger and the other small children assisted in tasks such as bullet casting, while the women and larger boys helped the fighting men, of whom there were about 40. Kruger could recall the battle in great detail and gave a vivid account well into old age. During 1837 and 1838, Kruger's family was part of the voortrekker group under Potgieter that trekked further east into Natal. Here, they met the American missionary Daniel Lindley, who gave young Paul much spiritual invigoration. The Zulu king Dingane concluded a land treaty with Potgieter, but he reconsidered and massacred first Piet Retief's party of settlers and then others at Weenan. Kruger later recounted his family's group coming under attack from Zulus soon after the Retief massacre, describing children pinioned to their mothers' breasts by spears, or with their brains bashed out on wagon wheels. But God heard our prayer, he recalled, and we followed them and shot them down as they fled, until more of them were dead than those of us they had killed in their attack. I could not shoot moderately well, for we lived, so to speak, among the game. Because of the attacks, the Krugers returned to the Highveld, where they took part in Potgieter's campaign that forced Mzilikazi to move his people north across the Limpopo River to what became Matabele land. Kruger, and his father settled in the foot of the Magaliesberg Mountains in Transvaal. In Natal, Andries Pretorius defeated more than 10,000 of Dingane's Zulus at the Battle of Blood River on the 16th of December 1838, a date subsequently marked by the Boers as the Day of the Vow. Burgher. Boer tradition at the time dictated that the men were entitled to choose two 6,000-acre or 24-kilometer square farms, one for crops and one for grazing, upon becoming enfranchised burghers at the age of 16. Kruger set up his home on the farm Boekenhout Fontein, near Rustenburg in the Magaliesberg area. Kruger later became the owner of a piece of farmland named Waterkloof on the 30th of September 1842. This concluded, he wasted little time in pursuing the hand of Maria du Plessis, the daughter of a fellow voortrekker south of the Vaal. She was only 14 years old when they married in Potchefstroom in 1842, and the same year, Kruger was elected a deputy field cornet, a single honor at 17. Meintjes comments, this role combined the civilian duties of a local magistrate with a military rank equivalent to that of a junior commissioned officer. Kruger was already an accomplished frontiersman, horseman, and guerrilla fighter. In addition to his native Dutch, he could speak basic English and several African languages, some fluently. He had shot a lion for the first time when he was a boy, in an age he recalled being 14. But Meintjes suggests he may have been as young as 11. During his many hunting excursions, Kruger was nearly killed on several occasions. In 1845, he was hunting rhinoceros along the Steelpoort River. His 4-bore elephant gun exploded in his hands and blew off most of his left thumb. Kruger wrapped the wound in a handkerchief and retreated to the camp, where he treated it with turpentine. He refused calls to have the hand amputated by a doctor, and instead cut off the remains of the injured thumb himself with a pocket knife. When gangrenous marks appeared on his arm up to his shoulder, he placed the hand on the stomach of a freshly killed goat, a traditional Boer remedy. He considered this a success. When it came to the second goat, his hand was already easier and the danger much less. The wound took more than 6 months to heal, but he did not wait that long to start hunting again. Britain annexed the Voortrekkers' short-lived Natalia Republic in 1843 as the colony of Natal. Pretorius briefly led Boer resistance to this, but before long most of the Boers in Natal had trekked back northwest to the area around the Orange and Vaal rivers. In 1845, Kruger was a member of Potgieter's expedition to Delgoa Bay in Mozambique to negotiate a frontier with Portugal. The Limbombo Mountains was settled upon as a border between Boer and Portuguese lands. Maria and their first child died of fever in January 1846. In 1847, Kruger married her cousin, Gesine du Plessis, from the Colesberg area. Their first child, Caspar Jan Hendrik, was born on the 22nd of December that year. Concerned by the exodus of so many whites from the Cape and Natal, and taking the view that the Boers remained British subjects, the British governor, Sir Harry Smith, in 1848, annexed the area between the Orange and Vaal rivers as the Orange River Sovereignty. Pretorius led a Boer commando raid against this, and they were defeated by Smith at the Battle of Boomplaats. Like the Krugers, Pretorius lived in the Magaliesberg Mountains and often hosted the young Kruger, who greatly admired the elder man's resolve, sophistication and piety. A warm relationship developed Kruger's political awareness that can be dated from 1850. Meintjes writes, "And it was no small measure given to him by Pretorius." Like Pretorius, Kruger wanted to centralize the immigrants under a single authority and win British recognition for their territory as an independent state. The last point was not due to hostility to Britain. Neither Pretorius nor Kruger was particularly anti-British, but because they perceived the immigrants' unity as under threat if the Cape administration continued to regard them as British subjects. Henry Douglas Warden, the British president in the Orange Vaal area, advised Smith in 1851 that he thought a compromise should be attempted with Pretorius. Smith sent representatives to meet him at the Sand River. Kruger, aged 76, accompanied Pretorius, and on the 17th of January 1852, as was present at the conclusion of the Sand River Convention, under which Britain recognized the immigrant farmers in the Transvaal as independent. They called themselves the Suid-Afrikaanse Republiek, or South African Republic. In exchange for the Boers' pledge not to introduce slavery in the Transvaal, the British agreed not to take an alliance with any coloured nations there. Kruger's uncle Gert was also present. His father Caspar would have been as well, but he was ill and unable to attend. So thank you for watching. If you like the content that we're putting out, please hit the like button. It's a very friendly shaped thumb over there, and hit the subscribe button and smash the bell icon so that YouTube can let you know as soon as the next episode is released. Thank you very much for watching, and stay safe and stay strong.